Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. Today's guest is Rohini Moradi, an Akashic Records practitioner and creator of the Magic Inclined community, which includes a podcast that is devoted to growing your spiritual superpowers. Today, we're going to talk about how the Akashic Records can uncover and heal blocks from a current or a past life. Rohini, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
You have a very interesting background. I believe you grew up in Tehran.
I did.
And your father ran the city's only Hindu temple. How did that contribute to or shape your spiritual beliefs?
I feel that from a young age, the idea of the unseen was very present in my everyday life. So I had fewer hurdles to get past to believe in energy work or the Akashic Records or whatever it may be. I feel like I have an advantage because of that. A lot of my students passed that initial belief system that's been instilled in popular culture, where it's like,
in Western culture.
Yeah, in Western culture. Yeah, I feel like it really helped shape me today.
It's almost like an unfair advantage based on where you came from. You're a couple steps ahead of a lot of people, which I find very interesting. And you also had out-of-body experiences. And I believe one was during an emergency C-section. Was that the first one, or were there more?
Yeah, I mean, that was the first one. The second one, I wouldn't. Well, let's talk about the first one. Sorry, I'm just getting too excited. The first one was when my daughter Rishi was being born in the hospital. Everything was like perfect, fine. And we were just waiting for her to come at the hospital. And all of a sudden, my vitals dropped and her vitals dropped and I couldn't breathe. And the nurse started panicking, pushed the delivery to an emergency C-section room. We were trying to deliver naturally at the time. Yeah, I was out of my body. I left and I watched the doctors and nurses panic, and they were yelling at me, if you don't move. At least I was out of my body for that part. They're yelling at me that if I don't move from this bed to the other bed, both my daughter and I will die. But I didn't have like a feeling of panic while I was watching this, which was really, really interesting. It was more like this feeling of love. And I don't know a better word to explain it. It wasn't love like, I love you. It was just like, it's okay. I don't know how to explain that feeling. I remember coming back to my body and being so happy. It was really strange. I'm trying to put all those feelings into words right now. And it's becoming
pretty difficult.
Yeah.
From what I've been told. Unless you've actually experienced it, it's almost impossible.
It is almost impossible. Yeah. And the only way I can really describe it really is this immense feeling of interconnectedness. Like I just felt very connected and like at ease with the connection. I don't know a better way of saying it than that, actually.
Pretty consistent with a lot of the other cases. You've also had multiple near-death experiences. Was the out-of-body experience a precursor to that, or was it part of the same experience?
It was part of the same experience, I would say. They're 2 months apart, but it was a part of the same experience. It was right when my daughter was born. I was out of my body and I came back and I held her and we were just in bliss. And 2 months after that, she passed away in the hospital. I remember sitting there as in a shell of a body pretty much when they told me she wasn't going to make it. The last thing I remember is falling to the ground. And after I fell to the ground, I wasn't in my own body again. And it was that same feeling from before. But this time it was a little different because I was watching myself just on the ground. And then my husband came and touched me and I was like, it's okay, try to console me. And it's when I sort of came back. But I feel like from that point on until like maybe like a month later, I was hanging on outside of my body, like to not feel that immense amount of pain. It's a different type of near-death experience where it wasn't like my life was actually being compromised, but it felt like, I would say it's more of an out-of-body experience the second time. It was too painful to be in my body.
I'm very sorry that you had to go through that, but you make a good point about the immense pain almost force you to go out of the body. This was explained to me once where someone is about to have a really bad, say, car accident, where their soul basically leaves the body before the point of impact.
Wow.
It sounds like a very similar type of experience.
Yeah. I don't think I would have been able to get to that point if I didn't have like my big near-death experience during the C-section. Since I had felt that being out of my body was a thing. I think it just like happened naturally because of that. But I'm just speculating.
Oh, it sounds like they are similar experiences. I've also heard people talk about astral projection, which you need to have an out-of-body experience to do that. But it seems like there are similarities to that, the feelings and the experience with a near-death experience. Once you went through that, did that have any impact on your spiritual beliefs that you had before, or not necessarily?
It changed my whole life in a sense, because I feel like up until that point, I had a lot of unearned wisdom in a way. I was listening to the beliefs of others. And once I had my own experience, I was able to actually formulate my perception of it. I feel like that was a big changing point for me. I used to meditate as a child, and after that, immense pain and trying to get myself back in my body, really, because I wasn't there. Like, I don't remember 2 weeks of my life. I don't remember anything. Yeah, I'm trying to get myself back in my body. I started meditating. I think it was at that point when the spiritual side of the world started opening up to me. And one really strange thing that happened during that time was, so right after my daughter passed away, we took a little journey to India to get her ashes to the Ganges River, which is like a custom tradition there and something I grew up with. So it was really important to me that immediately booked trips we went. And right when we got to this little town called Haridwar, which is like a really holy town in northern Western India, this woman back in America named Sandra, I didn't know her at the time, but she works with my husband's sister's husband. So just a co-worker of his, somebody we didn't know, started having these incredible dreams about us, specifically about the exact point in the world that we were at, which was really interesting because she didn't know we were there.
Dreams about you.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
really weird. And it was her dream that opened up everything, really, and reassured my inner compass, reassured the spiritual weird stuff that was going on around me at the time. It was really her dreams that started my path.
And that led you to learning about the Akashic Records
Yeah.
and your current practice.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any other things that the near-death experience and the out-of-body experiences that you learned about pretty much right away?
Yeah, of course. And this is like a cheesy thing, but the thing that I really learned about was how precious every moment is. Because now every day as I go through life, I'm like, this could be my last breath. This could be my last day. This could be the last time I do this. But not in like a dreadful doom kind of way, but like, wow, I really appreciate this thing that I'm doing right now. And I want to be here. I want to feel all of the feelings that come with it. I think that was the main thing that I took away. And I think that's the whole point of the Akashic Records or anything, is that this present moment is so precious.
Because of your background, it's no secret that the Hindus, they have a firm belief in reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
Has that changed from the traditional view, or has that remained pretty constant?
That's a really great question. I feel, in my personal belief, it has stayed the same. And I feel like the way it was being described to me as a young child, my perception of it has changed. And I think a lot of people put their opinions on what they believe, as we do, because we're our own universe. I understand that. But I feel that all of those teachings have changed and become more on a vibrational format than an actual, like, very specific, like, this will happen to you if you do this. I don't know if I'm even making sense with this answer. My beliefs are the same, but my perception of it has definitely changed. And the mechanics of it and understanding the mechanics of how that actually works.
It actually does make sense, because whenever we start talking about frequencies and vibrations, there's different levels.
Yeah.
It's like a frequency on a radio station
Mhm.
or TV channel or something. I've also been told that unless we have actually been the experiencer, we can't really understand it in linear terms. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no way
Okay.
we can fully comprehend it in this body, you know?
So fast forward to you're learning about the Akashic Records. What other influences, other than the ones you just mentioned, did contribute to you following that path?
It was kind of like more of a nagging thing, really. It wasn't an influence. I just kept seeing the words Akashic Records everywhere. And I saw it for the very first time I saw it, it was just like, ooh, like that shift inside where something goes, And I don't know.
You're filled with joy and you must be doing something right. So we want to
Thank
know
you.
exactly what you're doing because we want that too, right?
Thanks. Well, I'm just giving up. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I started Googling about it, and the stuff I was finding on the internet was just like, oh my gosh, what the heck? No, thank you. I'm just not into that stuff. I don't want to be the weirdo who's declaring myself as this extreme spiritual person, even though we all are spiritual. But I'm just saying, it was like a completely different world than I was in. I had completely abandoned everything that my upbringing had brought me to. And really in a way to just like fit in with society. I was tired of not fitting in. So kept seeing the words. And a lot of times the explanation of the Akashic Records wasn't resonating with what I knew true inside. And at the time, I didn't know what it was, but I knew something. Yeah, I kept seeing it. I kept seeing it. I kept reading about it. And eventually I'm like, I'm really into this thing because I've researched it now for like a couple months. I started taking as many courses as I could. And most of those courses are like really great because they open up the idea and me being open to it. But they're all teaching very different things. So it created a lot of like a snake oil kind of vibe. With the unseen, we can really describe it as anything we want and make people believe whatever we want. And that's the dangerous thing about these spiritual tools and modalities is you can sell people based on like a trending word and make it whatever you want to say. And people are just going to believe you because they don't know what it is. And that's what was happening. I was taking all these different courses. I was reading all these different books and they're all like conflicting a little bit. Some of the things were similar, but it really created unease. So I decided to start exploring it on my own, like within the actual Akashic Records and stop listening to the people around me and just.
So you went within.
Yeah, I went within.
You were just referring to lots of different people, sources talking about something, and they're all a little different, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Because you want to search for some consistency.
That's the human side. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Because I'm trying to learn about this like everyone else. And that's why I tend to ask a lot of the guest speakers the same questions and try to find the commonalities.
Yeah.
So with all these people with all these different opinions on the records, does that have something to do with this wave of empaths, intuitives, and mediums and psychics? Do you think that's all part of the same movement? It's almost like a tsunami wave.
Yeah, it is.
It seemed to be everywhere.
I know.
Right?
I know. And I feel like all those things are just naturally a part of us. They're just being awakened, I think, because everyone's going through trauma. In their grief, they're finding that they're more than they thought they were, which is really cool.
And I think there's definitely a good component of that, minus the obvious fraud and the snake oil salespeople.
Yep.
That's going to happen regardless. But since we're talking about intuitives, what do you suppose would be the difference between an Akashic Records reader or practitioner and a psychic medium?
I love that. I'm not a psychic medium and I don't know their experience, but from my perspective, it seems like the psychic medium world explores the astral plane. It's what lives within the astral plane, and the Akashic Records are not really a part of that. They're all a part of everything. Everything's a part of everything, of course. It's different layers. But the Akashic Records are more like a ledger of vibrational frequencies. And that's all they really are. These vibrational frequencies could be in this lifetime, last life, next life, whatever. So it's just like a ledger of the way people describe it as everything that has happened, is, and will. But it's just of all a time, lives right now. And that's what the records are. It's weird. There's no emotional connection to it. It's more like a fact book.
Past, present, and future is happening all at once as parallel roads running in the same direction.
Yeah.
With linear thinking, it's kind of hard to get your head around that. So, but is it possible then for someone who is a psychic medium to be able to access the Akash?
Absolutely. Everyone can access the Akash. It's a part of ourselves. It's a part of that dark matter that's all around us. Absolutely. I think it takes more skill actually to become a psychic medium and be able to communicate with the actual spirits. But yeah, we're always actually accessing the Akashic Records throughout our day unknowingly. You know, when you're like walking down the streets and you're singing to yourself and you're like, la, 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 just not thinking about anything, enjoying that moment. And all of a sudden, without asking for it, this big idea, this big revelation, this big thing comes to you and it all makes sense. And you're like, I need to remember this. I can't believe this came to me. So you're walking back home to write it down and you're constantly reminding yourself, remember this, remember this, remember this. And right when you go to reach for your keys to open the door, it's completely gone. That's the Akashic. That's the same. When we're channeling the Akashic records or we're tapping into them, we're just making that intentional. We're quieting everything and being in that peace within ourselves where we can actually access this information intentionally rather than it being dumped on us.
Like a download or something.
Download, yeah.
Since you are a near-death experience survivor, several NDE survivors, as they're called, claim that a lot of these mystical experiences, shamanism, near-death experiences, out-of-body experience, Kundalini Awakenings, Akashic Records are connected. And you mentioned something about when you're in that space, whether it's astral projection or you're out of your body or you're having an NDE, that all these things are connected. What are your thoughts on that?
I can completely agree with that. I feel like the Kundalini Awakening brings on that ability, but I don't think it's in the same plane of existence, although they are all connected in existence. I feel like when we go, because I have astrally projected, I have done that. I've just never done mediumship before. When we go into that centered place where of the void is where we could start seeing the different layers and choosing which dimension, I guess is the best word to use, that we want to access. The Akashic records are in like the energy density of the 8th dimension. So
8th. So it's way past us. A lot of us are stuck in the 3rd dimension or density.
And it's not even anything like better or worse or anything like that. It's just the way our bodies are just vibrating. And our surroundings also affect the way we're vibrating. Just being on planet Earth, we're just going to vibrate at this level. And that's great. That's just what we're experiencing. But we have to bring our body and our spirit's vibration to that point within ourselves to be able to access the different dimensions. And that's how you do it. It's by your frequency and what you're bringing yourself to. That's how you choose. I'm going to go into the Akashic record today. I'm going to go astral project today. The intention and vibrational format of your body brings you there. It's like time travel.
So when we talk about vibrations, frequencies, you're saying that's not necessarily the same thing as the astral plane?
No, it is. I was just saying
It is.
Yeah. It's all the same. It's all vibrational frequencies. It's just when we're going to a specific place, we match that vibration. Like the phantom notes, we match the frequency of that phantom note and we become a phantom note ourselves where we meet.
So basically you are not a medium.
No.
But during your readings, have you had experiences where you were able to connect with either your ancestors or ancestors of the person that is getting the reading?
Yeah. So the way this works, the Akashic Records or the Akasha is like a book of ledgers, and they're really difficult to read. It's really dense information. So what I like to do is I like to call in spirits or entities or energies who have vibrated with that person or with myself to help me read the ledger, because it's difficult for me to read it. So that's pretty much what happens. And depending on what energies are surrounding this reading or whatever, like the delivery could be different. The information is not usually different. It's pretty similar, but maybe like the specific parts of the information could be different because this energy knows this person could benefit mostly from this part of the ledger instead of like the whole thing. So that's how we work with them. And I've never like seen a spirit or anything like that, like mediumship where I talk to the spirits. It's just really translating the ledger. And then I'm the translator from the translator of the ledger to the person, which is what happens.
That sounds really cool, by the way. I don't think I've heard it explained quite like that, but a medium that I just talked to earlier today, and she was telling me that she will enlist the help of spirit guides, either hers or sitters, in order to get validation. Like if you were a spirit, I would say, okay, can you give us some validation so Scarlett here knows that you are who you say you are? So it seems to me like there's a very fine line between what you do and what the mediums do using the spirit guides or the energies. They're just basically different descriptions for the same energies, right? Same entities or whatever you want to call them. So about your practice, there's a way that apparently the Akashic Records can uncover blocks from a current or a past life. There's a healing component. Tell us a little bit about that. And if you have examples, that would be great too.
Yeah, of course. I really don't like using the word blocks because I don't feel like we're ever really blocked. I don't feel like anything's really holding back. And I think actually accepting ourselves in this moment and saying, with all my faults or whatever they are, I am whole. But if we're having conflict in one area constantly, or if we can't get past this thing within ourselves and it's like a repeating pattern, then I would say this is when we call on for like healing or to remove blocks or figure out what it is to untangle. Because then it's like energy is always flowing, it's never blocked. So this untangling can be done by going in the Akashic Records and asking for the specific thing that you are having trouble with. For me, I was having like a lot of inferiority complex stuff where I'm not good enough and all these things that some humans go through. And I could even argue that most humans go through.
Probably so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I went in and I made it very specific to see if it's in this lifetime. A lot of things that happen within our lifetimes are repeating patterns throughout lifetimes anyway, just because we constantly attract the same energy. So I went through this whole remapping of things that I had seen or heard in my childhood where it wasn't even directed at me. It wasn't even about me at some points. It wasn't even meant to be mean or something, but we're such sponges as little kids. So we take everything in and we internalize it. And I saw myself in this lifetime taking information in and being like, now you are this, and actually watching the mechanics of it happening in my body. And then I said, okay, has this happened in a previous lifetime? So we went to a previous lifetime where I don't even know how to describe it. I saw myself as maybe like a witchy woman or something like that, hiding out somewhere in the forested area. I couldn't really figure out what part of the world it was, but it felt like I had to constantly hide who I was, hide my superpowers, hide how I relate to the world in order to stay safe. So we just kept going back and seeing that this is a repeating pattern of you have to hide to feel safe so that they don't come and hurt you so that you can live your life. And once that untangling happened for me, there was like a big release. And it takes a while to heal from something like that. So it wasn't immediate. It just like little by little started dripping away. And I've seen it happen with so many of my clients as well. I don't really want to share their stories because it's like, it feels weird to do that. But there are a lot of very similar stories like that where we go in about a problem. Is it in this lifetime? We see what's happened in this lifetime. Has it happened in previous lifetime? We see what's happened in previous lifetime. And oftentimes there's the validation because in this lifetime, there are actual examples that they've experienced. And they're like, oh, yes, this did happen to me. I did internalize it this way and whatnot. So after that, it's safe to go in the past lives and explore that because then they know that it's coming from them.
What you just explained, there's an interesting parallel with past life regression,
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's very similar. I believe the way it was discovered and popularized was Brian Weiss.
Mm-hmm.
His book, Many Lives, Many Masters. He had a female patient that had some kind of condition, and he was an atheist, and he was doing regression therapy, which is still fairly common. And in this case, he went really far back with this woman, like 3,000 years ago, without knowing what he was doing. Exploring a past life through the records versus past life regression, do you think it's maybe a more subtle approach or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I feel like within the records, we're not fully experiencing it rather than like hearing about it. And I think that's the main difference. Where with past life regression, I believe we go through our past experiences a little bit. So that's where it differs. We're not experiencing it in the moment the same way we would with past life regression.
As you would in a therapy session. Interesting. So you also do a past life meditation.
Yeah.
Now, is that something the client can do on their own?
Absolutely. We can do this on our own. That's why I teach people how to do this. I really want everyone to know how powerful they are and how much they're capable of. But in the beginning, if people need help strengthening those muscles to be able to recognize the shifts and what it feels like and how to do it, then they can start with like an Akashic meditation where it's led by me or whoever they want it to be led by. But yeah, in the beginning, I think it really helps to maybe go through a meditation like that by a trusted practitioner so you can feel the shifts within yourself before accessing the Akasha. You know what that feels like, which is what like all these prayers or the verbal cues are for. And then once you're there, you know how to guide yourself through it. And it's really following your intuition and the questions that are coming up internally that'll take you where you need to be. I don't know. Did I answer your question?
As far as I know, you did.
I think so too.
Because it's basically that meditation is something they can do on their own,
Yeah.
or some people might prefer that you guide them through it.
Yeah, totally.
I think it's good that you teach people that you can all do this.
Yeah.
Everyone can access the records. And as you mentioned before, you probably do this on a daily basis or even when you go to sleep at night without even realizing it. Now, your spiritual team consists of ascended masters, teachers from the past, loved ones that you have known in this lifetime. Is that a fairly common way for an Akashic record practitioner to conduct their business, or do you think that's a little bit more personal to you?
No, it's not personal. It's pretty common. It's actually the teaching of Dr. Linda Howe, who was my teacher when I was learning how to become a practitioner. Since then, though, I have really started going down the rabbit hole of this and going back to my roots and studying the Vedic way and how they used to do it in ancient cultures. They didn't really pinpoint it down to these entities. The way I understand these entities to be now isn't so defined in the same way as this must be one ascended master, one teacher, one loved one, or whatever. It's really all energy. And I think the way we're putting words on the type of energy is getting that we're connecting to is just so we can wrap our heads around this. Because let's say I'm channeling the ascended masters or whatever to access the Akasha. I'm channeling like a much older energy because ascended masters, from at least what I saw and I understand in the Akashic Records, I was shown like there's this one energy that gets broken in two and then multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. And the idea of ascended masters is like these first energies that got broken off that are so powerful that are like within this whole group of energies that were broken off, you know? So they're just the ones we're drawn to because that's where we ascended from in a way, energy-wise. So yes, those words, and yes, that's what I use. And
it is fairly common.
Yeah.
I think you would have to call on your sources.
Yeah.
Their loved ones who have passed, spirit guides, ascended masters, and so on. Magic Inclined, that's a community that you created that also includes a podcast to help us with our superpowers. I like that. Tell us about that.
Well, once I started teaching people how to channel the Akasha and open their own records, the one thing that kept coming up was, now what do I do with it? You have to go practice now. Practicing opening the records for others really opens up the world because you realize this information is not coming from you. When it's ourselves, it's like, yeah, but I knew that. Yeah, but I had a feeling. But when you open up the record of somebody else, you're like, whoa, that has nothing to do with me. That information is not mine. Very interesting. So I started the community so that people have a space where they could actually practice reading the records for one another when they're first learning. And it's kind of connected to the podcast a little bit. The podcast started mainly for me to tell my story about the dreams that I mentioned earlier, because they're really strange. And it's just kind of evolved. The whole community and everything just happening in front of me. And I'm also just participating.
It sounds like fun. It's almost like a gym for like metaphysical type things. It's very cool. So what are some upcoming things that you'll be talking about on the podcast, or what are some things that people should look for in the podcast?
Well, I just started doing channeled readings on the podcast for the listeners. And this is something I was really scared to do because it's not like entertainment, you know. Akashic Records isn't like, buy my thing because I can do this thing. It's just such a sacred place and there's so much reverence. It's like all the vibrational frequencies of life, you know, and everything that has, is, and will be. So it's really reluctant to do something like that. But people kept asking for personal readings and I've stopped doing personal readings. And now I'm just doing collective readings on the podcast, and it's been really amazing. I'm so glad I did it and got rid of all my blocks or whatever. I untangled whatever I needed.
It sounds like you're pretty untangled because you seem very happy. So you're obviously doing something right. How can our listeners learn more about you?
Go to magicincline.com. I wrote a whole free ebook so you can learn how to access your records. And it has everything in there. And then after you do that, you can join the community and just post about practicing on somebody. And this is all free.
Rohini, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate how you shared your experiences, and I will put your website link in the show notes as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. You can also leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.